We're not going to vote our way out of this. You know, ICE, they're not even talking about abolish ICE within the National Democrats. You
No,
can't get none of them to speak about it. Where's
no.
Ro Khanna right now?
Where's AOC? Because AOC ran on abolishing ICE in her platform.
Well, I knew where AOC was when she approved for more oil pipelines, where she originally started at Standing Rock. So did Ilhan Omar, who started at Standing Rock, Cori Bush, and a few others who 10 years ago this year were out at Standing Rock helping out.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they? We are at the 10-year mark for Standing Rock, and nothing's changed. We've gone further down into the collapse.
Joey, welcome back to the channel.
Ani bonjour, me have you back, James. It's been a couple months since I've been back, and in the past couple months, the resistance is flaring up in Minnesota, and we are pushing back, as everyone has seen. Right, we've seen this before. I want to echo back to like my ancestors, the members, and we need to come together around these times of injustices and push back against state violence. We're seeing that in Minnesota, and I'm excited to see what the future brings us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there has been some arrests that have been made by ICE. Arrest sounds kind of sanitized. I'm sorry. There's been some detaining, some kidnapping by ICE. And I want to share this because I think that is very appropriate, especially in regards to what is going on. There was another Native American activist that actually is talking about Native Americans that are being kidnapped by ICE. I want to get into this, and then if you need me to pause, if you want to respond to something, please feel free. But I want to share this as well, and then I want to get your thoughts about what's going on the ground.
So these are 5 Oglala Sioux tribal council members, and they have 4. There was 4 tribal members who were picked up by ICE in a community called Little Earth, right here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And one of them has been released, but they couldn't locate the other 3. So the council members here, they're all elected officials of the Oglala Sioux tribe. And they gained access to the facility, and they couldn't find their 3 tribal members. They're not. They claim that they're not classifying them by their nationality, which tribal members are also citizens of the United States since 1924. There's nobody more American than American Indians, but they were unable to find them here today, and so they're going to continue on. They got some contact information. They love the fact that you're here, that everybody's here, and they're going to be giving out tribal IDs to their tribal members who are in Minneapolis, St. Paul, at the American Indian Center down on Franklin Avenue. But I just want to say thank you to everyone that's here. Stay vigilant and stay assertive, stay constructive. We're in unprecedented time, the way that I see it. So,
Just your initial thoughts, especially in regards to people who are of Native American descent that are being detained by ICE.
Well, it's illegal detainment. Like you said, it is kidnapping. ICE does not have any authority over U.S. citizens, and we are dual citizens, but we are citizens of the United States. That's a simple fact. It was passed. Oh shoot! Correct me if I'm wrong. It was like a 1934 or around there that we were adopted. It was the Dawes Act, if I remember right. So it is an illegal detainment, and what they're doing in Minnesota is illegal. It's not just what's happening to the Native Americans, it's to all United States citizens. As for the 3 individuals that are being detained, am I coming through all right?
Yeah, you're coming through okay. It's a little bit laggy, but we're powering through.
Okay. As for the three Ogallala Sioux men that are illegally being detained, as far as I know, they haven't been released yet. The facility that they're being detained at is Fort Snelling, and a little significance on that Fort Snelling is that following the Dakota War of 1862, the U.S. government executed 38 men, two additionally later on. This is what we call the Dakota 38 plus 2. We see the riots happen every year. This execution was the largest mass execution in the United States history. Um, it was done by the hands of President Abraham Lincoln. Fort Snelling was created to host Indigenous families, children's, and where the actual execution happened in Mankato for the Dakota 38 plus 2. So having Indigenous folks being held illegally in this facility is just echoing back to the history that we've fought through the settler colonial empire that has taken over Turtle Island.
Yeah, I want to share this as well because you were referring to this. So this is the law that was passed in 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act. So this is it says the Snyder Act, also known as the Indian Citizenship Act, was passed on June 2nd, 1924. And it says prior to that time, Native Americans have been explicitly denied citizenship, first in the United States Constitution and later through the 14th Amendment. It says, however, while the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924 ensured that all Native Americans born within the United States had citizenship, the act failed to fulfill the promise of citizenship because Native Americans were not also granted voting rights. And so it just shows how even though this land is has been occupied by your people for thousands of years, to be honest, you still are treated as other, as someone who is not of this land, even though you are. Uh, if you can give us kind of just a humanizing of how this feels to be to be looked at as a stranger on your own ancestral land.
I don't see it being looked at as a stranger. I see it as a colonial land grab again. You know, this is, like I said, this is echoing what has happened to us in the past. It surprises me none that ICE or Trump's illegal domestic army is going after Indigenous folks. This is what rise of fascism looks like. This is what the course of this colony has taken, and we've done this before. We've seen numerous other presidents have gone down the fascist route.
Yeah.
um, and who do they target? It is our Black and our Indigenous brown communities that get targeted.
Yeah. Yeah. I think back to as recently as the Standing Rock, right? The Standing Rock protests where President Obama actually was forcefully trying to allow, fossil fuel companies to endanger the water in that area, and indigenous water protectors were trying to protect the area. You also have people like Abraham Lincoln, because a lot of times people whitewash Abraham Lincoln and said, "Oh my God, he freed the slaves," but he murdered Native Americans. People talk, don't talk about people like President McKinley and what he did, Monroe, as well as Andrew Jackson, which is considered to be one of the most notorious against Native Americans as well. So, really, to be honest with you, this feels as American as apple pie, if that apple pie is laced with cyanide. And so, what we see going on in this country is really just a repeat of the same old thing that has been happening even before this country had colonies.
Well, JB, I don't know if you know this, but Trump, Obama, Biden, they've all targeted the western border states. And, oh, excuse me, the southern border states.
Mhm.
And along that line are tribal nations. We've had indigenous folks been arrested by ICE several times. We have had ICE harass entire communities of indigenous folks because their reservation is right on that border.
Wow.
Not to dismiss what the current actions are happening to the Oglala Sioux and the Anishinaabe in this area, because I'm not trying to do that, but I'm trying to say that these actions by ICE, by this illegal army on domestic soil, is doing to our people has been going on not or before Donald Trump hit office. This battle over our lands has been going on before Donald Trump hit office. Yet we do see an acceleration, and we do feel that. Certainly, we feel the attacks that we've been fighting as tribal nations. We've been fighting this current administration left and right, asserting our treaty rights, and part of the 1924 bill, we didn't actually get our ability to vote until about 3 decades past that. Like, my sister reminds me always that, women got the right to vote, but it took a couple of decades before indigenous women got the right to vote.
Wow. Let me ask you this. This is just on your opinion between yourself and the rest of the Native Americans that you speak to on a regular basis. Are a lot of you saying that finally a lot of you got pointing to those of us who are not within the community? Is the sentiment that it's that finally you guys are actually seeing what we're going through? We've been going through this the entire time. It's just you guys didn't start to notice until we had a Republican president. Because a lot of times people weren't really looking when Biden was president, when Obama was president, when Clinton was president, or even Carter. So is that kind of that sentiment that you feel?
We still know that the Democratic leadership is not looking. It's themselves. We see that they're not looking. We see that the Democratic leadership refuses to bulk on abolish ICE, and see how Governor Walz is calling in the National Guard. Well, anyone who was here during George Floyd's murder understands the National Guard is not here to protect us. It's there to protect the cops, and in this case, ICE. We see that Mayor Fry and the St. Paul mayor refusing to hold ICE accountable. And both are Democrat DFL mayors. Democrats are not with us. We acknowledge that, but what we are seeing is that the communities, the labor class communities, are coming to their morals and saying no. And we've seen this before, James. Obama, when Obama was doing, the deporter in chief originally was deporting the Central and Southern American children back, that the evangelical right on their morals to join the rest of us to push Obama into making those DACA dreamers.
Yeah.
But even so, Obama didn't go all the way, and he used those DACA dreamers, and subsequently Biden has used those DACA dreamers as political tools because they gave them no pathway to citizenship, leaving them as vulnerable as a lot of the other folks that come from elsewhere. And as indigenous folks, even when the first colonizers came over, we opened our arms and our families and welcomed folks here. And we still do that to this day. And that's why you see, it wasn't the call because of our 3 Oglala tribal citizens that got arrested, got indigenous orgs active and engaged in this resistance. It's because we honestly understand if we allow the government to do unto others, they will do it onto us. And that's why prior to these 3 getting illegally detained, we were out there as the Indigenous Protectors Movement out in Minneapolis, as AIM, out of Minneapolis, we've been organizing as Indian Collective out of it's Sioux Falls, South Dakota, who has been engaging in our community, getting us trained and educated in how to build those mutual aid networks and how to build those information networks on Indigenous country has been at the front of this ICE resistance. And you see that directly within Seattle, you see that directly within LA, and you see that back here in home, where in Minneapolis, where the Indigenous communities, the Indigenous nations, and the Indigenous nonprofits have been working hand in hand with all the communities around us. And we're leading this push into not just to settle down this administration, but leading this push into something that will transform this system. And I hear the call. We've seen the posts online and the rally to be had on Friday, that they're calling for a general strike of sorts within Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth area. And you know me, James, for a long time putting a general strike. I am personally hesitant because it's a one-day strike. And to me, I'm watching the unions tiptoe around the wording of strike, and I can understand because they're tied into different legislation and into their contracts. But I see that this is just the start. You know, I came into your show, and I'm sorry to put, you know, a positive demeanor on such a tragic incident within the colony, but to me, it's calling and it's telling me that we are in that time of change. And what I call it, we are in that era of general strikes.
Yeah.
To me, it's not calling a general strike. It's me watching that action happen, watching that mass, watching that economic pause, and having those negotiations happen. The one day is not going to bring us to negotiations. I don't think so, James. But I see what it will do. It will mobilize our communities into doing a longer strike, a month-long strike.
Yeah.
And I got a chance to sit in one of those trainers training with Indian Collective, and we had a conversation around 3.5. The scholars say that we need 3.5 of the population to make change in this country. And to me, New York population plus Chicago population together, that's 3.5. Or that's Chicago and Minneapolis populations together. And I envision duos of cities going to for a month, working together, negotiating with the feds together, and then also negotiating with their local, state, and city governance bodies to push through legislation and policies that we want. That, you know, once they get, you know, a step forward, they come out a strike, and then another two cities pop off. And to me, that's how we avoid what we're inevitably going down. And this is that civil war that we're going down. And you know, the civil war of the 21st century is not going to look like our original American Civil War, the South versus the North. It's going to look more like what we see with coups across the globe, where authoritarian dictator takes over and puts the state against the people. And that's what we have right now. It's this authoritarian ruler who is not abiding by federal law and by constitutional law, taking over and using his own personal political army to harass and target blue states and blue cities, or also known as sanctuary states or sanctuary cities. And that's where the biggest demographic of his political opposition is at.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. I would like to return back to what he's saying here, because think there's more information that I want to get into as well.
Oh, and that's Chase Iron Eyes right there. He's the executive director of Lakota Law Office. Pretty good guy. I've worked with him throughout the years. I remember his first governor campaign from North Dakota back in 2016. That was the Bernie Sanders era.
Oh wow.
And I would actually go directly to the interviews that were done with the chiefs and the people, because Chase is coming in from out of the area, and if you see some good coverage over it, I would totally suggest going over to the Indigenous Protectors Movement, and we have on the ground boot ground coverage. And then I believe they also live streamed the press conference at the Oklahoma Chiefs.
Okay.
3 days ago, if I remember right. But Chase is a great guy. Like I said, I've worked with him in the past. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that background information. All right. Perfect. Let's continue on.
That President Trump's favorite president, he has the painting on the wall, is Andrew Jackson.
That's the father of the Indian Removal Act. The fact that we're here at Fort Snelling, this is a concentration camp, a prison for Dakota people. Abraham Lincoln ordered the largest mass execution in American history. 38 plus 2 Dakota people were hung here, right here. And so it's not lost on us at all. In fact, it seems like a deliberate jab at the soul of our people, but we also have relatives. They don't understand that we are America. How could you possibly target
James? That
Yes.
Dakota 38 plus 2. That was what year was that? That was 1824. No. What year was that? Well, okay, so the mass execution in Mankato of the 38-2 happened, and that following spring were the treaty negotiations between my tribe along with the Red Lake tribe, the United States government. So when we entered into treaty negotiations and contract with the United States government, we had this huge mass public execution looming over us, telling us that, either sign this or we're going to do something along the lines with you all.
So,
and this was some. Oh, go on.
Well, I was going to share actually the screen of exactly what you're talking about in regards to what Abraham Lincoln did. This is just the AI overview. It says Abraham Lincoln's relationship with the Native Americans was complex and contradictory. He says most notably during the 1862 Dakota War, where he approved the largest mass execution in U.S. history, but also commuted most of the sentences. So my thing is like and from what I'm hearing from actual Native Americans, because a lot of times the history gets whitewashed, was that it was really a push to convert them to Christianity, and they resisted.
Well, the war actually started, if you bring it back to Lower Sioux tribe, where the original reservation and the original settlement was out in Minnesota. They tell the story that it came from two brothers that were being specifically targeted by a local shop owner. And that shop owner himself had been extorting the local families, the indigenous families, putting them under credit, and some of them never even being under credit, but saying that they were, and then the white settler government taking their land, their possessions, and booting them back into the community. So this came from that original shopkeeper, and he ended up, the family went to the settler government and protested and said, hey, he's ripping us off. They ended up killing one of, I believe, the brother's mother, the two boys' mother, the shopkeeper and his faction. And so the brothers, the community contacted the settler government to address the situation. They gave it a year, maybe if I remember right, about 2 years to get some justice. Nothing happened, so the brothers took it in their own hands, and I don't want to say necessarily raided that store, but they went to take him out, and from the records, it shows that no, they didn't raid the store. They just specifically went after justice. The colonizers took that as an act of war by the Dakotas and started the Dakota War. I could be wrong in my recollection, but I was told part of this story when I was out in Lower Sioux about a year and a half ago. We were out there because we were getting together with the Dakota nations over a pipeline that we're battling.
Hmm. Wow, 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 wow. Thank you very much for that. And my thing is just like a lot of these facts that they say, sometimes they'll put a grain of truth into it, and then they'll also try to cover it over by whitewashing and saying, well, Abraham Lincoln was a good guy, but he had some conflicting. And it's like, come on, baby. It's not conflicting. Like, it's just like when they talk about, oh my God, but he freed the slaves. And I was like, but he didn't want to. In fact, Abraham Lincoln was recorded in saying that if he could keep slavery while keeping the Union together, he wouldn't even free the slaves. So he's not the champion that everybody thinks he is. Just like FDR is not the champion that people think he is. And so I'm sick and tired of, and we're about to enter into Black History Month in a few days. I'm tired of whitewashing these particular presidents, and really, I mean, if you can say this about basically all of them, is that there are a bunch of, maniacal human trafficking degenerates. I mean, that's basically what the presidents of the United States have always been. And people who will say, but this president, but that president, none of them, because they kept the system in place, from Washington all the way to Obama. And I'm also including the presidents of the United Confederate States of America. I mean, so it's the same thing with all of them.
There hasn't ever been a good president, and that's why the land needs to go back to governance with the indigenous nations.
Yeah.
Or rather, that's why the governance needs to be back in the hands of the indigenous nations from here.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also something I want to share with you as well, because this was and I want people to be very careful, especially what's going on. There's two things that I want to share. So, if you have the Ring doorbell, you might want to reconsider. Let me share this. So this is actually came out last year. It says Amazon's Ring to partner with Flock, a network of AI cameras used by ICE, feds, and police. It says Amazon's surveillance camera maker Ring announced partnership on Thursday with Flock, a maker of AI-powered surveillance cameras that share footage with law enforcement. Now agencies that use Flock can request the Ring doorbell users share footage to help with evidence collection and investigative work. Flock cameras work by scanning the license plates of other identifying information about cars they see. Flock's government and police customers can also make natural language searches of their video footage and find people who match specific descriptions. However, AI-powered technology used by law enforcement has proven to exacerbate racial biases. So, it says Ring has had a poor track record with keeping customers' videos safe and secure. In 2023, the FTC ordered the company to pay $5.8 million over claims that employees and contractors had unrestricted access to customers' video for years. So this is why, like, even though you're trying to keep your home secure, even then they're taking advantage of things like that. And so,
and then you're told if you're a criminal, then you're told if you're not a criminal, you don't have to worry. But to me, in 2026, it seems to me like the church committee never did it never did a thing. And for folks that don't know what the church committee was, it was a congressional committee to dismantle the McCarthyite era laws that put queers, um, liberals, leftists, socialists, communists, all on government watch lists alongside of their political opponents. You know, has this ever changed? You know, the mass surveillance is something that we talk about continuously in movements and how our cell phones are being traced. There's an article that was released a week ago where the State Department has access to your signal chats, your encrypted signal chats. There
Hmm.
was cases brought forward in New York, if I remember right, around 3 or 4 immigration slash climate activist signal chats that were going on and indicating that those individuals are linked to a T group. I know that James just got his monetization back, so I don't want to ruin that for him. But that's something that we are seeing in the nonprofit era. There was conversations on how the Georgia cop city organizations fought their RICO charges, in which we're actually seeing that that wasn't the full case and that they are still being tried on RICO charges. They are targeting our infrastructures to resist. People don't understand, and don't get me wrong, I also hate the nonprofit industrial complex, but I am also a part of the nonprofit industrial complex as the co-executive director of MUCWA. That these nonprofits are the organizations, the means of funding our trainings, our community actions, getting our representation within these court cases, and making sure that we have a resistance. In this current administration and previous administrations, they say it's by the rule of law, but to even access the rule of law, you need to be able to afford a lawyer. And without these nonprofits, we don't have this infrastructure in place. We don't have the funds because the billionaires have already extracted the majority of this generation's generational wealth prior to these people being born. So it's saying that mass surveillance is an issue, and I certainly agree that it is. What we have to think about while we're addressing this mass surveillance is how do we stop the censorship also against us? Because we see buddy in pairs on legislation around AI restrictions, the same as you get internet censorship tied up to it. We here in Minnesota, we've had numerous conversations around AI. I'm actually part of coalitions in Minnesota and nationally that are addressing legislation and policy on on data centers, and we've had to have conversations on whether if this bill is a bad bill because you're filling it full of censorship clauses that are going to just ultimately kill our means to have a public debate, have a conversation. And I'm sorry to bring that all the way to another topic from just surveillance, but you think about it, this mass level of surveillance teams up with these data centers and teams up with the AI being developed currently. The largest the largest uh, buyer of our AI is our police officers. It is our ICE. It is used to be this mass surveillance tool. My own town of Bemidji passed with duress against myself and a lot of other community members putting these type of flock cameras within our own town. And we addressed the city council saying, hey, you're not only going to be targeting people in our area, you're targeting the whole entire um, northern Minnesota, people that drive on this road just back and forth to work. And what is it for? So you can spend more money having their technicians go through that data. It to me, it in itself is a wealth extraction measure. Because to have that flock camera, you're paying not to buy it, you're paying to lease the technology, you're paying to lease the equipment, and then you're paying for the techs to go through that stuff before it even goes to the police officers or the ICE agents themselves, which they have to hire on another team to decipher what this company is telling them. So that's where the AI boom is coming from. And it's a fake inflated market for surveillance, for mass surveillance.
Absolutely. And in fact, your timing is perfect, because I do want to share this as well, because an article recently came out that really everybody should be paying attention to. And I'm going to share this as well. But this is an article from journalist Ken Klippenstein. It says exclusive secret ICE programs revealed, says leaked documents detail the dizzying scope of ICE operations. So he came out with this a few days ago. So it says Operation Benchwarmer, Operation Benchwarmer, Tidal Wave, Abracadabra, Dust Off, Fleur de Lis, are just a few of the secret programs recently undertaken by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. ICE has become a self-appointed bouncer for America under Donald Trump, enlisting tens of thousands of federal, state, and local police and intelligence departments and agencies, not just to root out illegals, but also exploit them for intelligence. He says Border Patrol officer outraged by ICE's conduct has leaked to me this and other documents providing an unprecedented glimpse into ICE undeclared activities across the country. So it talks about a 15-page long document marked law enforcement sensitive, details 21 different major ICE operations resulting in 6,852 apprehensions since June. It says from Operation Abracadabra, a covert effort to develop informants among immigration and detention. Operation Benchwarmer, which alone spans the deployment of 2,000 intelligence assets across the country. The document gives a sense of how aggressively ICE is scouring neighborhoods and developing sources to spy on immigrants and Americans alike. So this is more than just trying to get the quote-unquote illegals. This is really to just get as much information on Americans while violating our Fourth Amendment rights. And they're doing it through the guise of trying to get illegal immigrants out of the country.
It's a modern day COINTELPRO.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what it reads. It's a modern day COINTELPRO, and their goal is to collect as much information from their political opponents to use against them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the original issue was with the McCarthy era legislation and policies, which is why we had to have the church committee. This nation has never let go of its mass surveillance. This is exactly what the slave catchers did to our slaves. They infiltrated those communities to have each other narc each other out. That's exactly what they've done to our communities. We call them Indian agents here in Indian country, where you had families that were specifically identified that would work with the state to hand out goods and resources that were treaty rights, but they would ration it to families that would speak out. They would restrict it.
Yeah.
You know, these tactics, don't white people come up with anything new? Like, for real, James, do they have no inspiration, no creative touch in their body that they have to just reuse failed tactics over and over again?
That's a question. And the motivation behind it is what many people would expect. And I want to share the motivations behind this as well here. Ken Klippenstein, he brings out this. It says the media is telling a certain story about ICE, giving the blow-by-blow on the most public horrors, but never quite seeing the bigger picture that it is part of a larger war. As a military intelligence source told me, the ICE crackdown isn't just about immigration. It's about gathering intelligence in support of Trump's war on cartels, as well as on Antifa, aka anti-fascists, on the radical left, and those who are quote unquote anti-American, and anyone else they consider terrorists. And since the administration has been so quick to label everyone, including Renee Good, who was murdered by an ICE agent a few days ago, terrorists, is no wonder they think they are at war. And so this is not just ICE. It says ICE's work is done under a set of task forces with an agency called upon other Department of Homeland Security agencies like Border Patrol, Homeland Security Investigations, Federal Protective Service, and even the Secret Service. DHS now constitutes the largest federal law enforcement agency in the country, larger than even the FBI. And that was before ICE had its law enforcement budget nearly tripled last year. And that tripling of the budget is bipartisan, by the way. It's not just Republicans, it's Democrats as well. And so this is why I think a lot of us have to be very careful, especially about what ICE is doing, because it's not just about trying to get these undocumented immigrants out of the country. It's really an excuse to spy on Americans. And this is something that I think we really need to talk about.
If they want that much in my business, I want to know why they failed the Pentagon's audit 9 times in a row, 10 times in a row. I want to know where the Epstein files are, unredacted.
Yeah.
If they want to know all that about my personal life, they need to start having some transparency on their side, and that's what we're not having from any of the administrations from before. And you're right. We can't move forward until we address the situation that we have right now. And that is this mass surveillance that is coming at us as those T-word and that are targeting and shutting down nonprofits under that same guise. You know, we're lucky to see the release of Leonard earlier last year. A half measure that it may be, but him being a victim of COINTELPRO and having that infiltration within Native Nation, we understand that we had family members that were left dead without their teeth, without their hands. This is the same brutality that we saw back in the 60s, back in the 70s.
Yeah.
We see where this will take us. You know, it's going to lead to people like you and I, James, that are with same-sex partners being on those lists, being targets.
Yeah.
And we see that, oh hell, we see the people rising up. And that's why I'm not scared. I'm scared for the people who will lose. But I understand that we have to do something. If we do nothing, that's not harm reduction. And we need to put this community, the United States, into a course that won't impede or blow up our own communities, and allows liberty, allows growth. And the conversation, you know, I brought up the conversation around the general strike in Minneapolis. We're not going to vote our way out of this. You know, ICE, they're not even talking about abolish ICE within the National Democrats. You can't get none of them to speak about it. Where's Ro Khanna right now?
Where's AOC? Because AOC ran on abolishing ICE in her platform.
Well, I knew where AOC was when she approved for more oil pipelines, where she originally started at Standing Rock. So did Ilhan Omar, who started at Standing Rock, Cori Bush, and a few others who 10 years ago this year were out at Standing Rock helping out.
Mhm.
Where are they? We are at the 10-year mark for Standing Rock, and nothing's changed. We've gone further down into the collapse.
Mhm.
And since 10 years ago, all we see is our communities getting angrier and getting organized.
Mhm.
And I can't wait until the midterms.
Mhm.
Can you? We're going to have a wave. It's not going to be a blue wave. It's going to be a red wave again. But that's the final nail on the coffin of the Democrats. Do you think after 2026 that they'd ever get elected again nationally? I'd hope not.
Mm.
I'm not here to talk politics so much, but I think we need something different
Yeah.
because we've been going on the same train of supporting these folks.
Yeah.
And what have they been doing? They built this surveillance state. Out of my lifetime, there's been more Democrats in office federally than there's been Republicans.
Mhm. Yeah.
So if you want to repeat the 60s, the 40s, the early 1900s, the 1800s, that's where we're going. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Thomas Frank talked about this in Listen Liberal and The People Know. The crux of his books were that we are in a codependent relationship with a liberal faction of the
Mhm.
corporate faction.
Yeah.
And The People Know was about that corporate faction, that liberal corporate faction, coming in and breaking us up and silencing us.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it's recently came out that Gen Z is now the least supportive of both parties. Many of them are actually rejecting both political parties. And so it's just interesting to see how they're waking up as we speak. And so my thing is I think we need to advance from, because there's layers to this, right? There's rejecting both political parties, but then there needs to be a rejection of the system overall, because I think that's in that direction, and I think that's what scares the corporate parasites so much, is that if we start to reject the system overall, that means that their ivory towers are really built on toothpicks, and all it takes is just one little blow and then it all falls down.
And that's where the censorship and surveillance is coming in. It's because there's, what, 3,000 global billionaires, maybe almost 4,000. And we know that. My mom, when she was growing up, there was never such thing as an accounting of rich people outside of like entertainment magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And the newer generations, I'm a millennial, but I'm an older millennial. We've had that
Mm-hmm.
ability to research and look up and have information at our fingertips.
Yeah.
And that's what has motivated the younger generations. It's not that they're getting mad, it's they're getting learned. They're seeking the knowledge of why we're in this shithole. Why are we here? And that's the path that I went on myself. My mom used to, when we were growing up, used to watch the news every day while she was getting ready for work. She worked overnights, so we'd watch the 6 p.m. news, and I'd ask questions upon questions upon questions. But you have a newer generation that are asking those questions, and they don't have to rely on their mother saying, or their father, or their parents, or their teacher saying some "I don't know" answer. They can easily say, go Google that, go search it, and we have that information at our fingertips. When we're talking about like the surveillance, they're surveilling us because we know what's going on. They're not hiding it necessarily. A lot of this stuff is out in the open. I was giggling previously when you were reading that article because the one of the admins for ICE here in Minnesota was in that picture, and we were watching him on TikTok the other day, my sister and I, and him walking in this huge gray trench coat. And all Gina and I could think about was, man, you look like an SS Nazi officer. And they're not trying to hide it. They're not trying to hide that this ICE isn't uh, Donald Trump's private military service. You know, it, and they're not trying to hide that they are censoring us. The whole TikTok ban, when they said it was because of China, but we all know that it was centered around the struggle and the resistance in Palestine. But with us knowing and us coming together and us fighting back, that's what Minneapolis is. That's what they've been doing. They've been coming together and informing each other. You know, Indigenous organizations came in to help educate and organize and inform on how to do different tactics.
Yeah.
And they consider us terrorists. They consider us that T word because we're offering educational and training.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is not new. We saw this specific piece of policy in legislation in Minnesota 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. And we see it within the federal policies that are trying to get passed through Congress. Every 2 years, you have these type of legislation going out to identify and target individuals. And the information that they need is what they've been building with these AI surveillance tech. Myself, they want to know where I'm traveling. They want to know if I'm going to the cities. I had a trip planned. Friday, we had a Rise and Repair legislative kickoff event. And my sister and I knew that, you know, we're going to get watched. We're going to get surveilled. There's a huge possibility we could drive into Minneapolis, St. Paul, get pulled over just because they've been watching our signal chat. They know that we've been attached to organizing in this area around the resistance. And to me, where's my liberty? Where's my freedom from not having an overbearing government like controlling every step I am taking? And then why do I have to be so concerned for my safety against the United States government? Why? Aren't they supposed to serve us?
That's a great question. And for anybody that is standing behind this, if you have that "Don't Tread on Me" flag, you need to throw it away because you don't mean anything by it. You know, you'll stand there in your camo, gear, and then brandish, all your guns while you're hunting in the woods. But then you say that you're forming a militia just in case the government becomes tyrannical. And yet you look at what happened to the Native Americans and Black Americans in this country, and you see them being tyrannical towards us, but you somehow don't think anything's wrong with that. But then once you see them being tyrannical, even to white people, y'all still don't do anything? Cowards. Absolute cowards. They shot a white woman in the face and nothing was done. And a lot of us Black and Native Americans have been saying, if they do it to us, they'll do it to you. They shot Sonia Massey in the face. Where was the marches? Where was the people in the streets for that? It was only a few months ago. Sonia Massey was shot in the face. Now Renee Good gets shot in the face. And guess what? How many people are really in the streets now for Renee Good? And that was a white woman. So ultimately, the people who say, oh, we need to guard against tyranny, they are posers. They're posers with a gun hobby. That's it. And all they and they don't even need bullets. All they need is some polish, because that's all it's there for. It's there just for show.
And don't come talk to me about small governments and local control after this one.
Absolutely.
Because when you are coming after my governor, when you're coming after a mayor, a city mayor, and the attorney general, because they're trying to find justice for Renee Good. I mean, home rule should have been the theme. We should have jurisdiction over this case.
Mm-hmm.
And the federal impeding the investigations on the attorney general's case here in Minnesota, that's political intimidation.
Yeah.
That's obstruction.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that this administration could give two jack craps about the rule of law.
Yeah.
It was never if Renee was a law-abiding citizen or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's they have us so polarized. And James, you're right. You brought it up that it was the majority of the newer generations. Say it's the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans don't vote because we know that the system is rigged. We know it's controlled. We've been disenfranchised.
Yeah.
And what do you have? You have a quarter of the population voting for either side, if that. But no, Renee, they're calling her the T word. They're using her sexual preference against her. They've been calling her son's school, harassing the school. What does the kid have to do with this?
Isn't he 6 years old?
Yeah, like between 6 and 8. He lost his father like 2 or 3 years ago, and now his mother was brutally murdered by the country that's supposed to be his country. Man, but you have these hateful people across the country and here in Minnesota that are doing anything to protect this administration's illegal actions. Doing anything to say that this administration's immoral actions are God's will. Oh, I've come across, those chit chat groups on Facebook are just terrible for these kinds of conversations. And you see it. They use the B word. Don't tell me that you care about white women if you are talking that Renee Good deserved to have what happened to her. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
In our interview that we had on your other show, I brought up the fact that white supremacy harms more white people than any other demographic in this country, and Renee Good is the key point on that conversation right there.
Yeah.
And look how many people are bending over backwards to justify her murder.
Yeah.
How many white men are bending over backwards, blasphemizing their spirituality, and even their own political stances to justify her murder.
Yeah. Yeah. White women are a tool for a narrative for them to use in order to justify the brutalization of anybody who is not of them. That was what was done, especially to Black Americans, particularly Black American men, to justify coming after us because they said, oh my God, they're going to come after our white women. And then they brutalized us for it. I think it was it Emmett Till that was
Mm.
accused of whistling at a white woman, and they brutalized him to death. And so ultimately, that's what it has to do with. And here you have, it's crazy because there's that story about the white woman that was murdered by a black immigrant on public transit, and then they flipped out about that. But then a white man kills a white woman, and then now they're making excuses. So it's never actually about white women. It was always about who the perpetrator was. And also,
It was a Haitian man.
some people are gonna get mad at me for this, but it is what it is. I'm gonna put it out there because it's the truth. Everybody wants to talk about the crimes that illegals are doing, but yet they don't really highlight all the crimes that American citizens are doing on a day-to-day basis, which trumps the amount of what undocumented immigrants do. You tell me all these crimes that are being done by American citizens, and you only want to cover what the illegals are doing, when in reality, it's like, okay, if you want to cover what undocumented immigrants are doing as far as crime, okay, but have that same energy for American citizens who are also doing the same things, if not worse. Have that same energy. Be consistent. Because if you're not going to be consistent, I don't want to hear a damn thing from you. And that's the crazy part to me. It's like, oh my God. It's just like the whole thing with people talking about, oh my God, they're LGBTQ, so they're grooming kids. Meanwhile, you have a rapper that decides to have his son sleep with a hooker. And that's not grooming? That's not abuse? Like, come on now. If you're going to be consistent, then please be consistent. If not, shut the hell up. Because I'm sick and tired of people always hand-wringing about, oh, well, this particular group, that particular group. Look, the only group that we need to focus on is the parasite class at the top that is honestly keeping us in this position. They've been keeping us in this position for 500 years. 500 years. It started with your people, they continue with my people, and now they're shafting other people. And this is one of the things I try to push, as far as like we need real justice and not this fake behind justice that they're pushing our way, trying to say, oh, we're trying to make America great. No, you're trying to make rich Americans greater. That's what it is.
And being consistent. Let's be real. The majority of people that commit white collar crimes in the United States and in Minnesota are white males. So when we're coming here into Minnesota because of all the Somali fraud, let's be real. The majority of people who do fraud in America are white males. And don't get me wrong, I am a nonprofit executive director. Fraud scares the crap out of me. I make sure our books are on point, and we're doing what we need to do to account for every penny that's being spent within my organization so we don't get smelt at. But let's be real, the majority of people who do fraud in America and in Minnesota are white males. Again, it's not Somalians. It's not, but you see that, ICE and customs are grabbing money from Somalians that are trying to flee the area. That's their paychecks. ICE pulled in, I think it was like $1,400 last week from 2 Somali immigrants that were leaving the area. That's a week's worth of money. That's not the $14 million that are being funneled into whatever fraud case you're calling. That skinny white man who came around Minnesota doing all those videos, Nick Hateful, whatever your name is.
Nick Shirley.
Nick Shirley. You go through all of those cases that he brings up, the majority of them are debunked. There are several online Minnesota content creators that have ran the records, have gone through the public knowledge, and have made the simple phone call asking, do you take walk-ins? Do you have room for more folks? Whatnot. they're here just trying to spread a hateful narrative so they could justify and manufacture the consent to use ICE against American citizens.
You hit the nail right on the head. Thank you very much for that. You know, so one of the things that I also wanted to discuss was you have uh, one of the things I think that's absolutely necessary is that you are also pushing for a know your rights course within your area so that people who may encounter ICE, because there's a lot more footage that I can show. And of course, we know there are Black people, Black Americans that are being attacked by ICE. There was just a, a story that was done that was talking about how this Black family, they were trying to just get home. I think their son had a game or something like that. And the car got flashbang, and then they threw tear gas, and the baby, who was only 6 months old, stopped breathing, had to be, I'm sorry, how many?
4 children were in that car.
Children. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, yeah, they're Black American. They are citizens, and yet they're being hit. They're being, caught, swept up in this too. And then I also talked about the gentleman that was shot by an ICE agent in California, an off-duty ICE agent. So like this is happening to people who ICE is technically not supposed to be going after at all, and yet we're getting swept up in it too. And so people need to know their rights, whether they are citizens or whether they are immigrants, both.
Agreed. It wasn't just the 3 Oglala that were taking under illegal detention. We've had numerous Indigenous folks within this area that have been taken in detention by ICE. The 3 that were brought to prominence is because the Oglala Nation came to Minnesota. They're based currently in North Dakota, or excuse me, South Dakota. But let's be real, the majority of Minnesota is Dakota land. So they came back to their homeland to address the 3 that were taken, and then give their current citizens in that area new tribal IDs, because tribal IDs are federally accepted forms of ID. My tribal chairman, Jamie Azure, also came to Minneapolis over this past week to ensure that our tribal citizens have tribal IDs. But this has been going on for a while. Pretty much all of last year, we've had folks whispered a water protector pulled in about 2 weeks ago that we had to mobilize the city or the community to get her out. Yeah, this is inhumane, and they are targeting Black and brown, any individual of color. And I might be a little bit pasty today because I've been out in the winter, or not out in the winter sun enough, but people my color, my skin color, have been being picked up for years, and it's been heightened under the last 6 months. To be specific, why we're having it here in Bemidji, ICE is moving into the more rural areas. Not saying that they're moving out of the metro areas in Minnesota, but they have been spreading it out. Trump keeps on sending thousands on top of thousands of his private army to Minnesota to harass us and scare us. So we do have here in Bemidji, I'm surrounded by 3 Indigenous tribal nations: Leech Lake, Red Lake, and White Earth. We are a border town, so we already have had our community on watch. We're doing the organizing. We're trying to get a Know Your Rights, a constitutional observer, and a security culture training here in Bemidji on Friday at the Native American Development Center here in Bemidji. It'd be 3:30 to 6. I know we're trying to cram in a lot during that time period, but still working with the vendor to give us just a little more time. He doesn't want to stay there late on a Friday night, but he's doing as much as he can. So we're having that training, but there's been families that have been pulled out of Park Rapids, and then I had just got hit up about an hour ago saying that there were ICE folks on their way over to Bemidji itself. So we're specializing on having those 3 trainings on Friday at the Native American Development Center here in Bemidji. These trainings have been held, like I've been saying throughout this whole entire interview, that in the cities, we've been having webinars around it. It's primarily being led by the Indian Collective out of South Dakota. And if you need one in your local community that you fear that ICE might be coming, reach out to Indian Collective. Their Know Their Rights campaign under their website right there. I'm so happy to get to work with these individuals out at Indian Collective, and just to highlight what's going on with Indian Collective themselves. The executive director, Nick Tilson, you all might remember the video that came out about 3-4 years. Yeah, about 3-4 years ago. No, excuse me, out of Trump's first term, I think it was 2018 that this happened, where Nick and the indigenous man cussing out the police for being in their parking lot. This is tribal land. If you remember that video that went viral. Well, he also led the pro. Well, excuse me, let me rephrase, because I'm not 100% on what was going on. So what I understand to be the situation. Allegedly, he led the rally and protest at Mount Rushmore, the 3 dead guys on the mountain, that's still our sacred mountain. It's originally Dakota sacred land.
Yeah.
It's a ceremony place. But when Trump came out there to visit, Nick Indian Collective led allegedly the protest out there, and this administration is going after him with federal charges. I think with a possibility of like 20 to 37 years in federal prison. So this is a political trial to arrest another indigenous water protector and indigenous organizer, Nick Tilson. His court case, I believe, is on January 28th. Folks, check it out for reals, because we're looking at a similar situation as such as Leonard Peltier, my uncle. So check out Nick Tilson's trial, Indian Collective. It's a bunch of political nonsense where Trump is just trying to rally his base against the indigenous communities across Turtle Island.
All right. Thank you so very much for that. And can you let people know what's coming up next and where they can find you and your work?
Okay, so like I said, we have that that training on Friday, but we also have I sit in a bunch of meetings every day, so bear with me. The 18th and the 19th, no, excuse me, the 17th and the 18th of February, we're having 2 legislative rallies at the Minnesota Capitol. The 17th will be our Rise and Repair rally at the Capitol, where we are championing protections for our wild rice, along with a bunch of other amazing environmental and mama key protections. The 18th is our No Data Center in Minnesota rally at the Capitol. The coalitions of the cities in Minnesota, we have 17 proposed projects in Minnesota. The handful of cities that have citizen-led groups are hosting this rally on the 18th at the Capitol. Both myself and my sister will be speaking at either one of them, both of them, whatever happens. We are carrying 2 moratorium bills against data centers, and then we have about 2 handfuls of good neighbor policies that will help make it hard for data centers to come into Minnesota, and then ensure that if they do come into Minnesota, we have the best possible whatevers. like best possible distance away from communities, best possible water use, and so forth. Is there any way there's best possible water use for data centers? I don't know. Anyways, come check us out there. You can check out a lot of my programming work at mukwaminkana.org, where I'm the executive director of. We are a grassroots micro grant funded organization. We haven't made it huge with the big money. I work most of my time volunteer. Done some cool stuff. You're looking at us last year out in DC at the People's March, the day before, 2 days before Trump was inaugurated. The day that Trump was inaugurated, we marched with the Martin Luther King rally and went to the AME Church in DC. But we do a lot of cool different work. We're mostly based out of Minnesota and Michigan, but we also cover Wisconsin, Illinois, and occasionally North Carolina. And then for myself, you can check out the links that this video is tagged under, which is my Twitter account. That's my personal Twitter account. Everything that's being put out of there, including my personal Facebook account, which I'm more active at. Everything being put out of there does not reflect the organization itself, and it's not an endorsement, but is my own personal feelings, thoughts, and opinions. Yeah, that's where you can find me. Am I doing anything else soon? I think that's it, James. Unless you have me back on, or if someone else pulls me on to do an interview. I am open for anyone else who does interviews to book me. Tuesday's the best for Joe, to be real. I don't have many standing meetings on Tuesdays. So, miigwech for having me here, James.
Yeah, thank you so very much for coming on. Joey Peltier, everybody, please make sure to follow him on all the socials and also contribute to the organization Mukwa. So thank you.
Chi miigwech, gigawagamen minawa.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you'd like to see any more, you can look here. 1 or